Welcome back to Bible and Blues, and we are back in the book of John. Took a day to and posted something different yesterday, and I hope you liked it. It's actually what we do on Friday nights. Meet with a bunch of friends, and a bunch of four, just four of us. But sometimes there's more, sometimes there's less. And we sit and talk about some things that are important to us as Christians. Sometimes we pick out a subject that's good. Sometimes we don't. We're hit and miss, of course, but we're here for you, and we're here to examine our faith in God and in Jesus. And what does it mean to be Christian in the world of today? So, anyway, before we get started, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you comment down below how you feel about this. These are, these are here for me, but also these are here for you. So, without further ado, we now move on to John chapter 20 in the NIV translation is what we're using. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They've taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and looked in at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight to the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. So, again, we're talking about the disciple that Jesus loved. This would have been John, the author of this particular book, dealing with the whole how do you represent yourself when you're when you're talking about yourself in writing. There was a way to do it in the past. There's a way to do it now. This is how they did this. This is it was considered presumptuous to refer to yourself in your writing. So interesting. Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. And so she went back to Simon Peter and said, "Hey, what's going on? Check this out." And they ran. Okay. And apparently John was a faster runner. Yeah, okay, that's good for him. A lot of people are faster runner than me. Pretty much everybody I know, except maybe my wife who's stuck in a wheelchair. Okay, she can't run faster than me. I have one up on her. Yay! Okay, so, but here's one of the things. I mean, have you heard of, oh, come on, I can't even think of the name. I'll post it up above, think of it. But it's the the cloth that they say cut, the shroud that was the shroud of Jesus. And here we see very clearly it was strips of cloth, and then probably a single thing that covered the face. This would have been the more traditional. They would wrap in strips of cloth, as opposed to one big cloth. That's why when I hear about that shroud. Shroud of Turin, that's what it is. Shroud of Turin. When I think about the Shroud of Turin, I'm like, well, that's a really neat concept and everything. However, that's not what we get from even biblical writings, let alone how it was done. So, and so I don't know their explanation for that is, but therefore I don't really consider something like the Shroud of Turin as a particularly trustworthy piece of evidence. Because again, it was strips. How big were the strips? I'd have to research that myself. I really haven't really looked into it. Only the fact that this is how they're referring to it. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus replied, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Instead, go to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I've seen the Lord," and she told them what he had said. And she told them that he had said these things to her. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, then they are not forgiven." This passage right here, if you know Catholics, um, Catholics will tell you that this is why priests are the only ones who forgive sins in the form of confession. When you confess to them, they will tell you, and I'm not going to argue with them, so I'm not here to argue about it. But they'll tell you that when Jesus did that, they became the first priests and the first cardinals. To the church that Peter was to begin. And so, therefore, they have the power to forgive sins. Whereas those of us in the Protestant side believe something different, believe that we all have the Spirit. And when we accept the Spirit, that's when our sins are forgiven. So, this is one of those, pinch points between Catholicism and Protestantism. So I'm not here to argue that. If you want to argue it, I'm sure somebody's going to tell me I got it wrong, and that's okay. You're allowed to tell me I'm wrong about things. So now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, before we Hellenized his name, one of the 12 was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Doubting Thomas. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you believe. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah and Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And this is a very important thing. Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. So Jesus does take the concept that we believe because of faith. We don't believe because we saw Jesus and we put our hands in his side and saw the stigmata on his hands and feet. We still believe, and so this is an important thing here for us, that we are more blessed because of that than even the disciples. Which this is again a dogma thing. We could talk about it. Tell me I'm wrong if you think I'm wrong. But Jesus did elevate in this passage those who have not seen and yet believed. So Thomas was, when I talk to people who are asking for proof, we kind of go back to this kind of thing. Faith is an important aspect of what we believe and why we believe. Yet we have faith because what has been revealed to us personally. So we have it. It's because of revelation. Jesus revealed himself to us. The Spirit revealed himself to us. God has revealed himself to us. We have seen something and felt something and reacted to it, and therefore that's why we have faith. Thomas required something elevated above us. So, but this is an important thing, and thanks be to God. Here is the reading of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I do believe we only have one more chapter left. I'm kind of checking that as we speak, because I believe that for this there is, and yes, after this it moves into the book of Acts, and which is also an interesting book to read. But this is, we have one more chapter in John. We'll be getting to that very soon. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have questions, please be sure to comment down below. And if you want to correct me in something, I encourage it. If I am wrong and misinterpreted something, I'd rather be corrected and gain proper wisdom in the book than to perpetuate something that's false. So thank you so much for being here. Very much appreciate it. God bless. Bye-bye.